Today on The Big Story.
Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is dead.
Death of the world's most wanted terrorists, ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. What now for the Islamic State and Southeast Asia? Sunny Singapore ramping up solar energy to power 350,000 homes. Find out why. Hello and welcome to The Big Story. I am Alyssa Wu. Now we begin with an exclusive over the viral video of a man seen verbally abusing a security guard at his Whampoa condominium. In an internal memo seen by the Straits Times today, JP Morgan, the employer of the condo resident, has reminded its Singapore-based staff to uphold a culture of respect in their daily conduct. Mr. Edmund Lee, the senior country officer for JP Morgan's Singapore offices, said, "Our people, services and commitment to integrity have made JP Morgan one of the most respected financial institutions in the world. We all have a shared responsibility for preserving and building on its strong reputation." Now, it's not easy being a security officer. They have to put up with drunk and violent civilians and unhappy condominium residents who take out their frustrations on them. In a recent viral video, a security guard was yelled at when a resident had to pay a $10 parking fee for visiting guests. Forum letters to the Straits Times expressed the need for better support for security guards. So it seems that security officers themselves need more security. To talk about this, Mr. Steve Tan, the Executive Secretary of the Union of Security Employees. Hi, Mr. Tan.
Hi, Lisa.
So firstly, what do you think about JP Morgan's internal memo that they shared to the staff about upholding a culture of respect?
Well, I think it's a respectable gesture. It is something that we would expect of a company of the stature of the JP Morgan. There are companies that insist on doing things right, and I've come across companies that engage in monthly surveys of every worker in the company, including outsourced employees like cleaners and security officers. So certainly this is a step in that direction.
Now, if you were that security guard at the Whampoa condominium, is there anything you would have done differently, or you would have done exactly what he did?
Well, I think the security officer did well. He was restrained. He knows that he is carrying out an instruction from the management council, who is the client ultimately. And I think there was a lot of calm, and he basically just continued to let the resident know that this was a council's decision, and he's merely there to execute it. So it's quite unfortunate that things had to take a spin this way, but I think the security officers did well.
Now, it's interesting that JP Morgan, they use the phrase culture of respect. Now, let's talk about the recent spate of abuse, verbal and physical, that security officers have had in Singapore. For some reason, they're really unfortunate. What do you think is the root of the matter? Why are they getting such abuse?
Right. So you use the word unfortunate. And actually, if you look at the security officer's job scope, mentioned in the Private Security Industries Act, includes screening, surveillance, guarding, bodyguarding, as well as traffic marshalling, traffic control. So any of these functions mentioned in the Act actually requires them to stop people if they are not following the rules, or turn people away if they are not expected to be on the site. What this really means is that you are putting security officers right at the front line, making people angry. So I think it is not a recent phenomenon that security officers, and not just in Singapore, are not respected. So to really solve this, of course, in the short term, we will continue what we have been doing all this while. We have partnered the security associations, handing out decals and information to all site officers in Singapore to inform them that the officers are performing duties as prescribed by the PSIA and Private Security Industries Act, and people should not disrespect them or abuse them. But this, I think, is something we won't stop doing, but it was effective probably in the short term. In the long term, we really need to do something more strategic. Yeah. So in 2014, we raised the wages, or rather we announced the progressive wage model that was to take place from 2016 onwards. So this acts as a wage a basis, right, for security officers in 5 grades to get a certain base salary, and we'll continue to push that up. So with that, we attract different people into the industry. Younger Singaporeans can see it shaping up to be a career of its own. But solving the wage is just one part. There are other things that we need to do. So last year, we launched the Industry Transformation Map for Security. How should we do security if we continue the over-reliance on manpower today? For every solution, we prescribe manpower. That is a very, very low productive, low security outcome kind of approach. So I think the best thing, as we shared in the Industry Transformation Map, was first, do a proper threat vulnerability risk assessment, TVRA. With that, you know what the site is for, what kind of risks it expects, and you put in the right technology to harden the site. With that, then you decide what kind of security officers you need. And when you deploy security officers in that way, first, you maximize the security outcome, and two, you raise the productivity of the workforce.
Okay, so you just shared short-term and long-term measures. So before the long-term measures kick in, what do you think about the use of weapons by security officers, like tasers or pepper sprays?
So I think in Singapore's environment, the union has a very, very close working relationship with the police regulatory department, and we have frequent consultation sessions. I think the overall security template in Singapore does not require security officers to carry pepper sprays and tasers. I think that really calls for a different kind of regime, regulating licensing, as well as how do you prevent people from misusing those weapons. I think more important is that the altercations that our officers face usually are verbal abuse and on occasion physical abuse. So how do we actually move away from behaving like that, right? All of us, when we see a security officer merely doing his job. I think that actually is the bigger challenge. It's not easy, right? We can regulate everything from wages, industry transformation, but we cannot regulate mindset change. So long as someone comes along and thinks that I am superior, you are inferior to me for whatever it means, I behave like that, I think that is a reflection of the person's culture, his upbringing, and we should try our best to respect every worker.
Well said, and thank you, Mr. Tan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, the world's most wanted terrorist, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, was killed by US Special Forces over the weekend. Today, Singapore's Ministry of Foreign Affairs said the killing of the ISIS leader is an important development in the global fight against terrorism. MFA said in a statement, as a member of the global coalition to defeat ISIS, Singapore remains committed to fighting global terrorism, including by the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. On Sunday, US President Donald Trump described the Baghdadi raid in graphic terms.
Last night, the United States brought the world's #1 terrorist leader to justice. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is dead. He died after running into a dead-end tunnel, whimpering and crying and screaming all the way. He ignited his vest, killing himself and the 3 children. His body was mutilated by the blast. The tunnel had caved in on it in addition. But test results gave certain, immediate, and totally positive identification. It was him. A brutal killer, one who has caused so much hardship and death, has violently been eliminated. He will never again harm another innocent man, woman, or child. He died like a dog. He died like a coward. The world is now a much safer place.
To discuss this, I have foreign editor Jeremy Aoyong with me. Hi, Jeremy.
Hi, Alyssa.
Now, there is the question of succession. So who do you think, or who are the individuals tipped to take over Baghdadi?
Okay, so, it happened not too long ago, but already we're hearing from, the ISIS and Middle East experts. 3 names have come up. Although before I get to it, I guess it's good to note that when people talk about killing ISIS leaders, sometimes they refer to it as mowing the lawn or mowing the grass, in that you cut it, it will grow back. So there is an expectation that this, while significant and while it will weaken ISIS, certainly does not mean the end of ISIS. Now, who have been tipped to replace al-Baghdadi? So I mentioned there are 3 names, and I do have to qualify this in that ISIS is not super well known. We don't have a lot of inside information, so there could be people outside this list. So even among the 3 names that have been listed, there are questions about each one of them. So one of them is, the first name is, I do have to look this up, is Abdullah Kardash. He is an Iraqi military officer that spent some time in jail with al-Baghdadi. His issue is some people believe he is dead. So there are reports that he might have died 2 years ago. We don't know. Then there are 2 others. One of them is a Tunisian national named Abu Othman al-Tunsi, and the other is a Saudi named Abu Saleh al-Juzrawi. So they each lead the legislative and executive council of ISIS. The problem with them, one is Tunisian, one is Saudi. The fighting force of ISIS is largely made up of Iraqis and Syrians.
Okay.
So it's always considered, it was generally considered that it's better to have the leader of ISIS be either Iraqi or Syrian, otherwise it might lead to defections. So, but these are the 3 names that have been raised so far.
So earlier you said you used the phrase mowing the lawn, but certainly Baghdadi's death, it has an impact on ISIS, correct?
Yeah, I mean, he was a figurehead, and he was their leader. So when you take out the leader, it certainly weakens the organization. Just that it doesn't kill it. So in very much the same way, when Osama bin Laden was killed, it significantly weakened Al-Qaeda. But Al-Qaeda is still alive today, in a weakened form, but it's still alive today. And ISIS is actually structured in a way that makes it a little bit more flexible than Al-Qaeda ever was. It's quite decentralized, and it tried to shape itself almost like a movement. So there was a period where there were a lot of attacks taking place all over the world, where people just claimed it was an ISIS attack, but it was not coordinated directly by ISIS in HQ in Iraq or Syria.
Now you mentioned that ISIS is decentralized, of course in Middle East where the headquarters is as well. Do you think the group is now are they putting in more efforts to radicalize people in the Southeast Asian region? And is that going to be a problem for us? Oh, it certainly will be, right, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, Southeast Asia, ISIS did identify Southeast Asia as one of its key regions, especially when it was facing some military defeat in Iraq and Syria. The death of al-Baghdadi might disrupt some of that control or coordination from Iraq and Syria. But like I said, it wasn't that much control or coordination to begin with. Still, there are a lot. I mean, there were a lot of ISIS sympathizers that went over to Iraq and Syria when they were trying to form this caliphate from Southeast Asia. I mean, there were even some from Singapore who wanted to go. And we've seen just over the past few years quite a number of ISIS-inspired attacks. There are affiliated groups, ISIS-affiliated groups that pledge loyalty to ISIS. They are conducting attacks in the region. I think in Philippines since July last year, there have been, I think, 4 suicide bombings.
Yes, that's right.
And they've also, in 2017, there was this big standoff in Marawi because an ISIS-linked group laid siege to the city and occupied it for months before they were driven out by government.
But do you think they're being directly controlled or coordinated from Iraq or Syria?
I feel it's quite unlikely, and I do feel, and even the Malaysia counter-terrorist chief did point out that the main concern here isn't so much that direct control, it is the propaganda. So he's worried more about ISIS ideology than leadership. So I think in the immediate aftermath of al-Baghdadi's death, he said the main concern now is lone wolf attacks of people who are radicalized by ISIS ideology through the internet. So it's less to do with that direct coordination from ISIS leadership, but more the idea, the propaganda that ISIS stands for.
All right, thank you very much, Jeremy.
Thanks, Ali.
Thank you. Now, Singapore is going to make the most of its sunny weather. Here's how. There are plans to increase the city's solar capacity by more than 7 times by the year 2030, which is enough to power around 350,000 households in Singapore for a year. And that is about 4% of Singapore's total electricity demand today. And to talk about this, I have environment correspondent Audrey Tan, who is at the Singapore International Energy Week conference. Hi, Audrey.
Hi, Alyssa.
Hi, you're calling via Skype, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I want to ask you, how viable is solar energy as an alternative energy option for Singapore?
So if you look at the array of renewable energy options that many countries use, whether it be wind turbines or hydropower, solar is the most viable option for Singapore. Well, firstly, we have a lot of sun, and we don't really have other things like high winds that can drive wind turbines or like gushing water that can drive hydropowers. So in terms of the most viable renewable energy option, that would be solar, but that is not to say it comes without any challenge. So yeah, we get a lot of sun here, but we also get a lot of clouds here. And sometimes cloudiness can cause shade on the solar panels and reduce their efficiency. And also because we are in a highly built-up environment, sometimes buildings may cast shade on the panels on the rooftops of another building. So there are a lot of constraints that Singapore has to deal with, but that is not to say that we are not trying our best to increase our renewable energy into our entire energy mix.
Now, how much percent of Singapore's total energy needs can be replaced by solar energy? So I know they're aiming for 4%, but how much more can we aim for?
So right now, solar only contributes less than 1% of to our total energy mix. So that is an important context. By 2030, Minister Chan Chun Sing said today at the conference that Singapore wants to increase this and with a new target for installed solar capacity that could meet about 4% of our total energy needs by 2030. Beyond that would depend on a lot of other factors, including things like the efficiency of solar panels. So right now, the average efficiency of a solar panel is only about 17%, which is actually very low. So there's a lot of research being done to see how we can make our solar panels more efficient. That's one. The other thing would be how much more space can Singapore devote to installing solar panels. So I mean, just like I mentioned earlier, that even if you were to install solar panels on many buildings, there are many other factors to consider. But right now, we are also looking into things like installing solar panels on water bodies. There are some trials going on in some reservoirs here. And we are also exploring the potential of installing them on offshore sea surfaces. So, I mean, increased efficiency is one, increased area for deploying solar panels is the other. And the third one would be overall reduction in energy use. Singapore's energy needs are projected to go up in the near future. I mean, with population growth and economic growth and growth of industries. But whether we can try to constrain that growth so that more and more of our energy mix can comprise renewables, that would really remain to be seen. And I think there's some research being done at the universities here to see exactly how much more solar we can look to. But I think this is an area that we're definitely considering, especially considering all the climate change concerns now.
Well, thank you very much, Audrey, for sharing with us. And once again, that was our environment correspondent, Audrey, who is at the Singapore International Energy Week conference. For more stories on solar energy in Singapore, do head on to our Straits Times website. And those were our top stories for today. For more news and videos, do head on to our website at straitstimes.com. Once again, I'm Alyssa. For more big stories, tune in tomorrow, same time, same place.